Hello and welcome to SAR Histories. In today's vlog we will be visiting the Black Country Living Museum. The Black Country Living Museum represents the single largest record of material in Britain. By visiting the museum it is possible to begin to feel what it was like to live in the Black Country when the region was at the peak of its industrial power. The motor garage is a modern construction, but its front was based on the garage of Bradburn and Wedge, established by William Bradburn in 1915, in a former horse tram depot in Darlington Street, Wolverhampton. The garage contains a display of vehicles ranging from the 1900s up to 1986. Though I'm not a vehicle enthusiast myself, it was still good to look around and will certainly appeal to those that like historical cars. The museum also houses a comprehensive collection of early motorcycles, such as the Sunbeam TT racing bike of 1921. We now come to the bus and trolleybus collection. By the 1920s, popular opinion was turning against the tram, seeing them as causing an unnecessary congestion on busy roads. So towns and cities began to turn to trolleybuses and buses as the solution. I really enjoyed this part of the museum, more than I thought I would. This was mainly down to being allowed inside the buses, which I found fascinating, and it was surprising on how basic they were, in particular the driver's cockpit. What we are now heading for is the Racecourse Colliery. The coal and other minerals on the present day museum were owned by the Earls of Dudley, and their exploitation was arranged through the Earl's mineral agent. The unmistakable outline of the timber pithead frame marks the position of one of the original coal pits on the site. It has been reconstructed as a typical small colliery of 1910 and named after the Earl of Dudley's private racecourse, which once ran across this part of the museum before the construction of the railway. It was this part of the museum that I found most captivating, as I have recently learnt that my ancestors were miners, my fourth great grandfather being killed alongside with 6 others after an explosion at Brereton Colliery in 1861. Now, has anybody ever heard of Richard Miles?
Yeah, big lovely place. It's free to the general public to go in. Now, at the bottom of this pit, they got 2 bare wires going down the pit, and that rings a bell, either to 1 for up, 2 for down, something like that. So, they did it one day, and what happened?
Certainly had their money's worth out of us today.
My stomach thinks my throat's been cut.
And I'm alright from and all. It was warm down there today, bitten all down my leg by jackknives. If I blister though, give me chip.
That Fred Barnlow was lucky today. That rock fall could have been the end of him.
Oh, but he shouldn't have undercut that rock, should he, Tom? Remember you telling me that when I first started?
Glad to know I taught you well, lad.
Come on, let's have it.
The complex of buildings includes a blacksmith shop, miners' hovels and a manager's office in the Weybridge House, rescued from Rolfe Street in Smethwick. The engine house contains a single-cylinder colliery winding engine of 1860 used at Amblecote Colliery from 1910 to 1926. A little further down the road from the colliery is the Toll House, set in 1920. The Toll House was built in 1843. It stood at the Littleworth Gate, Woodsetton, on the Sedgley to Tivedale Turnpike Road. Like most toll houses, this is a single-storey building with a living room containing a kitchen range, 2 bedrooms and an outhouse. After the middle of the 19th century, the powers of many turnpike roads were allowed to lapse and tolls ceased to be collected on Britain's roads in the 1890s.
Morning!
The Conway Garage is a replica built of modern materials, representing the garage which formerly stood near the Fighting Cocks on the Wolverhampton to Dudley Road. The museum has been used as a set for many film and television programmes, such as the first season of Rosie and Jim, WPC 56 and Peaky Blinders. Stan and Ollie, a feature film on the life of Laurel and Hardy, shot some of its scenes on the museum's 1930s street. We have now come to the road where you'll find St James's School, Hobbs and Sons Fish and Chip Shop, H. Morell's Gentlemen Outfitters, Humphrey Brothers Building Merchants, A. Hartle Motorcycles, A. Preedy Sons Tobacconists, Gripton's Radio Store and the 1930s Domestic Rooms. All of these buildings are set in the 1930s and each have their own unique character and are great to explore. Unfortunately, I was unable to capture footage of inside the school due to it being busy and only allowing a few in at a time for lessons. This was due to COVID restrictions, and I would advise anybody wanting to take a lesson at the school to wait by the entrance well ahead of the advertised time so that you don't miss out. All around the museum you'll encounter costume characters behind shop counters or hammering in workshops. Their clothes are central to the Living Museum and a great deal of research goes into them. There were many houses open to look around, each of them furnished and decorated authentically to the period they portrayed. It was like walking through a time capsule, in a time when life was tougher and yet more seemingly simple. The Cradley Heath Workers' Institute stands as a monument to the struggle of the women chainmakers of Cradley Heath who laid down their tools in 1910 to strike for a living wage, focusing international attention on the plight of Britain's low-paid workers and establishing the principle of a minimum wage. The steel trap works, owned by 4 generations of the Sidebotham family, is a unique survival of a metalworking trade, particularly associated with Wednesfield. By 1865, there was about 15 animal trap makers in the town. William Sidebotham had established premises on Rockery Street. The business expanded, and in 1913 a new larger workshop was built, which brought together the various stages of production under one roof. The Bottle and Gate Inn stood originally by the junction of Moore Street and Leys Road on Brearley Hill Road, Buckpool, and backed onto the Stourbridge Canal at the top of the 16 locks. The exact date of the construction is not known, but it was probably built shortly after the canal was cut between 1776 and 1779. The ironmonger's shop and hardware shop occupy 2 properties which formerly stood on the corner of Piper's Row and Tower Street in Wolverhampton. These 2 cottages are replicas of houses which still stand on Station Road in Old Hill and near the former Great Western Railway station for Old Hill. When they were built in 1848 and formed part of the Earl of Dudley's estate, They were typical industrial dwellings of their time, with 3 rooms, including a ground floor kitchen and pantry and a single floor bedroom. The 2 cottages originally shared a central chimney stack, but they were extended at different times to provide more accommodation. The contents of the nail shop were taken from a workshop located behind 17 Chapel Street, Hales, when dating to the 1880s, and last operated in Sydney Tether in 1940s. The structure is a replica of the original building. Though there is a few things still closed, there is still much to explore, with many gardens and back alleyways to get lost in. The coal-fired bakery from Albury is representative of the small independent bakeries which were once a common part of every Victorian and early 20th century town in the Black Country and across Britain. The museum has built the boat, dock and canal branch believed to have been formed by mining subsidence in the middle of the 19th century. This branch formerly joined the canal arm built in 1839 to link the lime kilns with the Birmingham Canal navigations. The museum's anchor forge is set in the 1920s and preserves the equipment from the last anchor forge to operate in the Black Country. Surprisingly, for a region so far from the sea, for over 100 years anchor making was one of its most prominent industries. Anchors were made for some of the most famous ships of the 19th and 20th century, including Brunel's Great Eastern, the Titanic and the Royal Yacht Britannia, were forged in the Black Country. The Darby New Connection Methodist Chapel was originally opened on the 29th of January 1837. The chapel closed down in 1974 and was one of the first structures to be rebuilt at the museum between 1977 and 1979. The chain shop was taken from the rear of 22 Claremont Street in Old Hill and was originally used to make odd work, but it is reconstructed to represent a typical small backyard chain shop for the making of small chain. It was built in 1890s and originally had 2 identical hearths, one of which was subsequently moved and replaced with a workbench. The Locksmith's house of 54 New Road, Winninghall, is typical of a small family-run lock-making business which once characterised the town. Although locks were also made in nearby Wolverhampton and Walsall, the concentration of skills and domestic workshops in Winninghall gave it a reputation as the lock-making centre of Britain. Even in the early 1900s, when the trade had shifted towards larger factories, backyard concerns like this one at New Road continued to survive.
way then, let's try it again. And back to the minute, tell me where the glassware was made. Boston. And what did they do with the glasses? Any idea? Good. Now, lay them on the table, darling. Now you have a cup of chai and you have a cup of salt, huh?
Visiting the museum made me realise what skills we are losing and on how reliant we have become on technology. I got a true sense of a tougher time, a time of hardship and poverty, yet also a sense of community that we are somehow lacking in modern times. The Tilted Cottage is set in the 1920s and gave me a feel of home. The cottage's distinctive tilt was caused by its sinking into forgotten ironworks, something that was common across the Black Country. It was while exploring this cottage that I began to think of my own parents and how much they would have enjoyed the cottage's homestead and seemingly simple life. The origins of Pitt's cottage are uncertain, but it is believed to have been built around 1890, possibly by Sam Pitt, who, with his wife Nancy, is the earliest recorded occupant of the dwelling. The cottage was not the work of a professional builder and showed all the signs of an amateur construction, with scant foundations and rickety walls made of second-hand bricks. For those that like the good old days, I highly recommend the Black Country Living Museum. Currently, they are expanding to have a 40s, 50s and 60s areas, which will add a lot more to this great museum that already has a lot to offer. Around every corner there is something to explore, and I'm left excited about one day returning. So that's it from the Black Country Museum. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe so that you don't miss out on more historical videos. Until next time, goodbye.